afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast State of the Balance Fest of the year 2020 here in January. With me, your host, Imperial Dane, the one, the only Master Propaganda, the only essential source of communist news, entertainment, and information. So, what sort of has been the state of the meta in January? There's been some slight shifts of saying what commands get used, but overall, in terms of like army usage, I think things are largely the same. Americans, Surge remain the most allied, popular ones. Oberkommando West remains very much the most popular. Axis 1, Brits and Wehrmacht are played, but are played in significantly smaller numbers. I mean, it's pretty much just a confirmation of the results there of the tournament here in November. And while we're finally seeing a patch, I mean, it certainly is looking a bit like they're just sort of only really giving the Brits any attention. Of course, likely Wehrmacht will receive some, but, well, we'll have to see how that actually looks. But anyways, how are things looking for the Serbs? Serbs remain still one of the most potent factions at the moment. Most factions at the moment go for heavy conscript build. Penal troopers are certainly not quite as favored at the moment, since again just going for 7-man conscripts or SVT-40 conscripts is proving to be very powerful and can be very difficult for Axis players to deal with, in particular once you get up to 7-man, which again they are nerfing the cooldown bonus to get to the 7-man. So again, indicating again the 7-man conscript upgrade was very potent if they're actually willing to step in to deal with that. And even then, there are still other things I'll be putting with the certs afterwards, like, you know, this is 3 divisional field gun, still feel like is quite significantly over tuned in with the nerf to the IS-2, it's still going to be quite potent as well. Overall, doctrinally, guard motor and such guard doctrine remain popular, but for the time being, it seems like shock rifle and other shock doctrines are much more popular. Doctrine with shock troopers, since they're quite potent, can just tear through German infantry. Be they Oberkommando West or Wehrmacht. Wehrmacht probably stands a better chance due to the MD-42s, but of course players still tend to rely on infantry, and shock troopers just tend to barrel through them. So in that regard, there's certainly an emphasis on shock trooper doctrines at the moment with the Soviets, and of course shock rifle, of course, being the primary one, since that's the IS-2, which, as again getting nerfed, should indicate again it is quite potent. So unsurprisingly, it's a very shock rifle focused Soviet meta at the moment. Of course, there are still other things. T-35 still remain popular and so on, but the lion's share of the attention at the moment is very much shock rifle, and there's even perhaps an argument they may want to tone down the shock troopers just a bit, but nothing big, just slightly tone them down possibly. Though in which way, hard to say. But oh wait, that's sort of part of the third meta. Then moving on to the Americans, things are, you know, here and there. There's recon support, there's heavy cavalry, there's airborne. There's even urban assault. There's some variety there. Tactical support infantry. There's no sort of particular, I think, American doctrine, except maybe again heavy cavalry that's overrepresented. There's been a slight increase in people using actually elite infantry, not just relying on their riflemen. Paratroopers and rangers, in particular, rangers seem to become more popular, to realizing, hang on, these guys are good. In particular, bazookas, and certainly bazooka rangers with triple bazookas are starting to become a bit more mainstay of American tactics as well. There's some slight evolution of the American tactics, and it is something you want to keep an eye out for when you're playing against them. Bazooka Rangers can be quite tricky for some of your more standard tanks to deal with. They need either machine gun, heavy infantry support, or specific anti-infantry armor to, you know, deal with it. Like an Ostwind from the Wehrmacht can sort of, you know, help deal with them. So that is something worth keeping in mind there. And certainly it's a part of the meta game there. But otherwise, you know, it's the same old, same old. Lots of 50 calibers, light vehicles, anti-tank guns. If they're going for them, they'll get several. And of course, pack cards, and particularly in team games and 2 vs 2s, there's a heavy emphasis on pack cards. Effectively, the nerfs they implemented last year basically amounted to nothing at all, really. Since again, you lose to see like 2 to 3 pack houses and like a 2 vs 2. So yeah, that didn't really do anything there, truth be told. And certainly team games also heavy emphasis on the Americans just blobbing up there. So I mean, overall the rifleman buffs I feel like were, you know, a mistake. They should have not gone for that, particularly to just make them more blobbable. In fact, rewarded them more for blobbing, just swapping up with infantry. So I mean, they may want to revert those buffs or look into something else there for the rifleman. Particularly the whole buffing the American grenades to make them more easily accessible, I feel like could backfire a bit further on top of everything. Again, the Americans alongside the Soviets had the highest win rate at the tournament, though they weren't quite as played in the finals. In fact, it was all just Soviets there, so a bit hard to say there, but they're probably not quite as powerful as the Soviets thusly, but they're still quite powerful, and they probably still need some more things to be like toned down to be looked at, because otherwise, again, I feel like they're just going to be the new dominant allied faction unless there's significant like buffs to the Germans, and so far those aren't happening. Fine, the Brits, there were definitely some British players happening. Comets are now definitely a much bigger part of the British metagame. Definitely seeing a lot more British players trying to push for comets, either rashing for them, so the ones who are more successful generally tend to do quite well with them. So that's certainly something for their commanders remain a part of it, with Mobile Assault and Commander and Vanguard. Well, probably most of Mobile Assault really sort of happening. Lend-Lease Assault was also recently popular doctrine, though not the most popular doctrine. As for, changes, obviously they're getting a bunch. They still feel like Relic is, barking up the wrong tree there. They need to stop trying to buff the section. They need to look at the Vickers machine gun. They need to look at like the Anvil and Hammer upgrade, I think, to make those a bit more attractive. I feel like, again, just buffing the section is going to be a mistake. It's just going to lead to fresh blobs. And again, as I mentioned in my other video, if they're going to pull that way, they're going to have to like look into nerfing something like the AC or something else, because otherwise, in particular the Wehrmacht, it's going to be absolute hell. So there again, and really again, need to look at the Vickers. Similar types of Wehrmacht, they need to look at the MG42. So I think that sort of covers there. Moving on to the Oberkommando West metagame there, has also slightly changed up. Where we used to be heavy on ground defensive, and it still is quite popular. Luftwaffe ground forces down become, again, more used once more, with Fallschirmjäger taking heavy presence. Also, I'm starting to see more Panthers. It's not just, Panzer IVs into Tigers. There's definitely a slight increase there in Wehrmacht Oberkommando players going for Panthers, so that's a slight change there. There's also a slight increase in elite armor again, but beyond that, there's not, I think, any sort of significant changes there. And so I would say overall Oberkommando's metagame in terms of like balancing. I mean, again, if you look at the tournament, they had roughly 50%. And as opposed to, so, I mean, the thing is, they keep balancing the allies around the Oberkommando West rather than the Wehrmacht. So in that sense, it obviously makes sense the Wehrmacht Oberkommando at some point is going to be sort of in air quotes balanced, because again, it's what they balance the allies against. But again, it's also kind of how we end up with the last faction being in such a bad spot, because they keep balancing everything against the Oberkommando West, and the Wehrmacht is decidedly not the Oberkommando West. And of course, the Wehrmacht had one of the low win rates alongside the Brits in the tournament. So as for the Wehrmacht metagame, they're saying some things here and there. Spearhead been seeing increased popularity again due to the Tiger tank and the fragmentation bombs, which are getting nerfed. Otherwise, German infantry's usage, elite troops' usage here and there. Jaeger infantry also remains popular due to the G43s and the Jaeger command squad, obviously giving some more firepower versus infantry factions like the Surds and the Americans. So that's certainly popular there as well amongst the Wehrmacht players. Panzer IVs, of course, remains sort of the key unit. Tigers, of course, also remain popular. There, of course, are some that go for Ostrums and Stugs, and I'd say those are the wiser ones. And there's also still some going for Tier 4s. Occasionally succeed, but a good deal of time, Wehrmacht Tier 4 just ends up being too awkwardly executed. And just, again, it just doesn't do enough. Like, Wehrmacht Tier 4 just isn't very good for like what it costs. Like, it's just too slow, too awkward, and just does not have enough firepower for the amount of time and resource you have to invest into it. It's still basically a Tier 3 that has cost us a Tier 4, but isn't actually a Tier 4, and that's really the main issue. I mean, Wehrmacht needs something in the late game to make it actually good, like either, again, elite infantry, better upgrades for the Panzergrenadiers, and also they still also need something in the early mid games, since again, like the Allies just being again pushed more to early game, but also getting strengthened in the late game. But again, the Wehrmacht is just getting nothing in either end. So again, that's one reason the Wehrmacht just isn't very popular, in particular on 1 vs 1. Again, there's a heavy emphasis on Oberkommando West. So there definitely needs to be some work done there to like make the Wehrmacht more attractive. Again, I'd still suggest looking at the MG42, giving it a faster reaction time, particularly to help deal with blobs, since again, it's not common to see, blob of light machine gun troops move up and just mow down the machine gun before it gets to shoot. So, decreasing that time before it can start shooting, which again at times can last up to like 1 to 2 seconds, which is utterly baffling. Would, do a lot there. Just make it easy to get out in a bad spot, because again, like, it's really slow for, supposedly modern air-cooled machine gun. I mean, it's slower to move than a bloody 50 caliber, so that could also be a way to make things a bit more attractive there for the Wehrmacht. And otherwise, again, maybe look into like the 222 in some way, or the 251, which got some buzz, but I would say to a large extent, while it certainly made it more useful, I feel still were largely cosmetic. Like, it still needs more damage, or at least some sort of suppression to be a bit more serviceable there. I think that would, do a bit for the Wehrmacht. But again, do something about Tier 4. It needs some elements. I mean, the Allies are constantly getting, stuff for free when they tech up and upgrade, and the Wehrmacht can't even get some extra, stuff for them force they have to pay for. It's like, there definitely needs to be something extra there at the end of the road for the Wehrmacht. I mean, again, the Wehrmacht in Companies 2 is pretty much just a poorly adapted Wehrmacht from Companies 1, where they took out a lot of the key elements that made the Wehrmacht in Companies 1 work, and they never replaced them. Which is really why the Wehrmacht isn't working now, because there is no, purchasable veterancy, neither for the infantry to the tanks. There's no medic bunkers that recover the loss. Again, the Wehrmacht have 4-man squads, but again, they were, compensated for. Again, they could purchase veterancy and recover the losses easily. None of those things exist. At least they also have the Nazi crossholders, but again, they don't exist either. So, for example, one of the Wehrmacht's thing again supposed to be strong in late game does not exist, because there's no compensation for the incredible losses they take. Similarly, the armor, which again is supposed to get better the purchase veterancy, doesn't exist either. They keep nerfing it, so there's just nothing there. Like, they need to make Wehrmacht armor either take more damage or pack more damage. Right now, they just again slightly on the same level as Tier 3 units, but 50% more expensive per unit. So that doesn't really make any sense. Like, they need to improve on that, or, you know, get me to do it, because I would certainly do it better than them at this stage, I think. So I think that sort of roughly covers the state of the balance for now. Again, we'll have to see how the upcoming winter balance patch handles it, and hopefully it'll do a good job there. But again, they definitely need to look into the Surge and the Americans. They're definitely overperforming, and the Wehrmacht and the Brits need some work there to, again, you know, be more better, but again, without creating blobs. And again, that's really where I feel like they're dangerously getting close to doing with the Brits again. So that's all the state of the balance here for January 2020. What are your thoughts on it? Agree, disagree, sign up for the comments. Just, you know, be nice and respectful about it. This is Imperial signing off, and see you all another time for another video. And of course, like I do, you can also donate or pledge on Patreon, but help me out a ton. Allows me to keep making these videos, so do consider it if you can afford it. This is Imperial, cheers, and see you all. Bye.